Hello and welcome to this video presentation. My name is Paul Brett. I'm a Senior Software Support Analyst supporting IBM Transformation Extender. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at Paul Brett IBM. The idea of this video is to give long-time Transformation Extender users the opportunity to see how things that they would normally do using the launcher part of the product can now be transferred to the new Design Server UI and deployed as a flow to the REST API execution engine. So, for the demonstration today, I'm going to show how instead of using the launcher to pick up and transform files, we will be creating a map using the new Design Server UI, creating a flow and deploying that to the ITX REST API to run as a file listener. The first part of this process is to log into the Design Server UI, which I shall do now, and you will note that I have no projects currently. Let's create a project. We'll call it Project 1, and then we'll go into that project. I'm going to import a couple of files first. The first file I'm going to import is an input file, which we shall use later. This is the input file we will be importing. It's called input.txt. I'll show you the content of that file. It has EDI in capitals and then a colon to represent an initiator of an EDI file, and the word data to represent some data. This obviously is not an EDI file, but I'm just going to use it as a demonstration today. So let's click and drag that down to import that file into our project. Done. We're going to be transforming the data to XML today, and for that I shall need an output schema. I've got one over here, output XSD, and I'm going to import that now. We click on schemas, we click on XSD, we drag and drop that to import it, and we are done. We're also going to need an additional schema, an input old type tree as it were. So we click on schemas, we click on new, and I'm going to create this one from scratch. I'm going to call this EDI input. Click OK. In the root object I'm only going to add one item. The item is going to be called text item, and I'm going to change the syntax properties so that it's expecting an initiator of EDI and colon. So that is my type tree now complete. I click save and I click close. The next step is to create the map. To do that we click maps and we click new. Let's give our map a name. Let's call it EDI to XML. Okay. I need to add a source, the old input card, IN1. Click next. I am going to use the command line to build this connection, not FTP, file adapter, and I'm going to read input.txt. Click next. I'm going to keep commit yes, and the schema I'm going to use is the one I just created, EDI input, and the object is text item. Okay, so that's my input card created. Let's go for an output card, create target. I'm going to call this out1. I am going to use the command line to build this connection again using the file adapter, and I'm going to write to output.xml. Click next. Next. And from the schema I'm going to choose the output XSD file that we imported, and from that I'm going to choose the XSD object. Okay, that's all the cards our map needs. Let's add the input one to the canvas. Let's expand output and see what we need to complete to get this map to go. Okay, on the output we've got a data object right down there, and that's where I'm going to drag my input to. And let's expand some of these rules. Okay, so MISC I'm going to complete with none. Version I'm going to complete with 1.0. Encoding I'm going to complete with UTF-8, and the final one I'm going to complete with none. Okay, so I believe that is my map now complete. I can save, I can build, and I can run. And the map has completed successfully. right click on the output card, we shall view the data, and we shall see that the input word data, which was on the end of the EDI initiator string, has now become the data in between the data tags of an XML structure. Okay, let's move on to adding that to a flow. For that we need to click Flows and New. I'm going to call my flow Flow 1. Okay, I'm going to add a map to the canvas, and then I'm going to right click to define which map I want to actually call using this map node, EDI to XML. I click on that, and then over on the right I can edit the inputs and outputs. I right click and I choose Enable Watch. I right click and I choose Edit Properties. Here's where we get to change the input, not to read input.txt anymore, but to go back 2 directories, into the data directory, into the input directory, and read any files that begin with any name and end with .txt. Click Next. If the map is a success, I want the file to be deleted. OK. On the output side, I right click, I choose Set as Flow Terminal. I right click, I choose Edit Properties, and I edit the connection again. We're not writing to a fixed file output.xml. Instead, we are going back 2 directories from the parent, where the map is, into data, into output, and writing star.xml. And what this will do is any incoming file, for example test.txt, would then create a file called test.xml. Anybody who's used the launcher before will be very familiar with wildcard usage here. Click Next. Create commit is fine. Click Next. Actually, I'm going to change the failure action to rollback, and I'm going to do that on the input side as well. Rollback. Okay. Let's look at the map settings, and let's turn on the audit and the trace for when things go wrong. Turning on the audit, I say I don't want a unique file, but I want files to be created, a fixed file to be created in the data directory in a subdirectory called logs / and this file is called EDI to XML.log. Okay, and settings audit, no, summary audit is always, that's the exact setting that I want. Let's copy that to clipboard. Moving on to the trace option, I'm going to enable that as well. I'm going to turn off the unique option, paste in the name I had before, but change it to MTR. So this is my input content trace. I also have to switch and tell which cards I want to be traced, and I'm going to say I want all input cards traced. And the final option I'm going to change is the warnings, which I'm going to override and set 2 of them to fail if they occur, instead of just being warnings. Okay, I think that's my flow complete and ready to be added to a package. So we will save this and close, and then add to a package. To create the package, let's go to the home, click on the deploy area and click on packages. We'll click plus to create a new package. We'll be creating a package called package 1. We'll be taking files from project 1, and from there we will be taking the flow called flow 1. Okay, that is a package created and ready to be deployed to the REST API. Before we do that, let's just show the Swagger page that shows the current endpoints. If I hit refresh here, you can see that there are none defined currently. Let's go back and click home and go to the deploy area, and we're going to deploy package 1 to local REST API, a server that I've already defined. I hit the deploy button and we get the deploying message, the green bar moving from left to right, and then a deployed successfully message. In the Swagger endpoint page now, if I refresh, you will note that I have the package deployed and it is now running on the REST API as a listener. Let's talk about how I created the REST container at this point. When I created the ITX REST container, I used the docker create command, and the important thing to note is my use of the -v parameter to mount a volume from inside the container to the file system on the outside of the container. Here I am mapping /data from the container to /opt/tx-rest in the Linux file system. Here we can see I have opened a PuTTY session to my Linux box that is hosting the containers. I have logged in and I have used the sudo command to change to root, and I've gone to the /opt/tx-rest directory. Here you can see 6 subdirectories. Now these subdirectories don't actually exist here, they are just mapped here, and they really exist inside the TX REST container. Let me show you a quick idea of what's inside the maps directory. We have a package1 subdirectory. Now this is because I've deployed package1, and if we have a look at the content of that, you will see my map and my flow are both in there. Going into the data directory for a moment, you will note that I have 3 subdirectories, one called input, one called logs, and one called output. In input, we have 2 subdirectories that have been created by the listener to help stage the documents as they are triggered. Okay, so let's trigger something. Let's put an EDI file in here. I'm going to use the printf command, and I'm going to print the following content. This is my data, and I'm going to print it to a file called test1.txt. And as soon as I press enter, this file is created. However, if I list the directory now, you will see that the file does not exist. This is because the listener has already picked it up, the map has transformed the data, and it has delivered it to the output area. Moving to the output area, you will note that I have a file called test1.xml. And if we have a look at the content of that file, you will note that I have the string "this is my data" enclosed in data tags as part of an XML document. EDI : is missing from the output because this was just the initiator for the input and is not considered part of the data that I mapped across. Okay, so you will also note that in the logs directory we have an audit log and an input trace file. Let's see what happened when we send in some data that does not allow the map to execute correctly. Just to remind you, we're in the output directory and we have one file, test1.xml. So let's use the printf command again and put in some garbage to the input directory in a file called test2.txt. We're in the output directory, but you'll notice that there is no test2.xml. If we have a quick look at the logs, the audit log shows that the map status is error. The map return is -21, which was originally a warning, but because of the map settings was converted to a failure. The message is input valid but unknown data found. If we have a look at the trace file, we see that garbage does not match initiator EDI : This is the reason that the file has failed. So where has the file gone, you might ask? Well, in the input directory, do you remember those 2 staging areas? If we go into wtx_error docs, we will find the file sitting in here, ready to be looked at manually or some automated process to remap that. So there we go. That's a summary of using the new design server UI to create and deploy a map to the ITX REST API, where the file listener can match some of the capabilities of the old ITX launcher. I want to thank you all for joining me for this video presentation today. If you found the content interesting and informative, please hit that like button. Follow my YouTube channel, where I will post great content on a regular basis. Follow me on Twitter @PaulBrettIBM. Thank you.